Coming up right now, the newest episode from Carr, Gwyn, and Ode on Three Pagans and a Cat. Welcome to Three Pagans and a Cat. I'm Carr.
You may call me Ode.
Merry meet. My name is Gwyn.
And our special guest today is...
Dame. How y'all doing?
We are doing very well.
We're doing great.
We're very excited to finally get you on the podcast.
This is our ultra special guest.
Right.
They're overselling it. I'm telling you right now, they're overselling it.
We're not overselling it. Lady Dame is great.
We first met Lady Dame last year at Michigan Pagan Fest, I believe.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And I went to several of your classes, and I loved everything you had to say. Even when I didn't agree with you, because you were very open about listening to other people's opinions and saying, okay, well, let's discuss this. Let's work it out. So I really appreciated that about you.
Plus, I think Lady Dame was the only one who decided that it was too hot in the sheds and moved her classes outside.
That is true.
Yeah, I'm not doing stupid stuff. I will never understand that. I grew up, half my year I was spending in Georgia with my grandmother, and so I don't do heat. Right. So, like, Georgia people are smart. They go, oh, it's hot, let's go in a building.
Right.
It's in a building, it's hot, let's go outside.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just like, we're leaving now. And they're all going to go outside under one of these tents nobody's using. And if you say something to me, it's going to end badly. That's pretty much how I live my life.
We lived in Georgia for 5 years.
Yeah,
I still have.
I
I was a child when we lived in Georgia, so I still have a weird nostalgia, even though I don't have a lot of very clear memories of Georgia.
Right.
I see red clay and I'm like, it's my home.
I do the same thing. Twitchiest thing that ever happened to me, I was in South Africa, and they have red clay in South Africa.
gosh.
So I'm in this place that's not.
It's not home.
Right.
And I looked at the dirt and went, holy shit.
It is home.
I'm back.
She started talking with a southern accent there.
Yeah. Yeah, the one place on earth where I really figured out that I'm just American. They're like, oh, you're African American. Go to Africa. I'm probably just American. I think I'm just American.
For our listeners who are not familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about your path and what you do? Because you're a speaker, you're a teacher, comedian.
Are we talking about my pagan path or just
everything?
Everything.
All right, so I started
Whatever you want
off.
to talk about.
I'm gonna, because we're Three Pagans and a Cat, I'm gonna steer just towards pagan.
Sure.
So I went to the Detroit Waldorf School, and Waldorf Schools, Rudolf Steiner created the Waldorf Schools, and here's an interesting history note. Rudolf Steiner was in the OTO, the Order Templi Orientis, before Aleister Crowley came in.
Okay.
So there's some heavy metaphysical leanings.
Right.
And if you go to a Waldorf school and sort of hang out for a second, if you're pagan, you're like, oh, I know this. I know this. It's they wouldn't call it a wheel of the year, but there's cross quarters.
Oh.
And they have Michaelmas, we had, Michaelmas is for St. Michael, so they do St. Michael and the Dragon.
Okay.
And when I was a kid, it's the second graders dress up as the dragon. And the teacher has the head, and all the kids hold hands, and they put a cloth over all of us. And eurythmy is almost I call it German Tai Chi.
Okay.
So we would learn eurythmy, and our eurythmy teacher would be St. Michael. Right? So he'd be out there with all his regalia with the sword, and he's going to knock down the dragon. It was all about us taking on our courage, and there was this whole underlying for it, but what always happened was about the last 4 feet of the dragon would just run off every year. So I don't think it's a good second grade plan. So I grew up celebrating St. Lucia Day, but not any of the other saints.
Right.
I grew up with St. Nicholas and not Santa Claus.
Okay.
So, and St. Nicholas would show up with Ripret, who would beat the kids.
Yeah.
Right. So there'd be this little guy dressed in black, dressed in rags, dressed in coal, and everybody would get a gift. And if you'd been bad that year, you legit got nothing.
Wow.
You wouldn't get it in class. They would wait till after class to give you something.
Interesting.
But you wouldn't get anything. I mean,
So you got
was
shamed before your
nerve-wracking.
classmates.
It was nerve-wracking.
That is rough.
Oh, baby. It was nerve-wracking. And there would always be at least one kid that they'd bring up and paddle. I mean, they would never really hit him, but they'd bring him up and paddle. Like, they want, Germans have, you know what I mean? There's no cuddly. There's you messed up and so you get paddled. So that's how it kind of started. And then I remember in 4th grade, we started studying the Norse gods, which makes perfect sense in the German school.
Yep.
And I went home and had all these questions, and I didn't ask my mother. I just sort of, they percolated in my head. And I came to school that next day. We were 4th grade. And I said to my teacher, do people still worship Odin? And my teacher said, in some part of the world, I'm sure they do. Like, at no point did she try to get into monotheism. She didn't try to push out this idea that these were old gods and no one was talking about. She was like, oh, I'm sure they do. And just that was pretty much the day that I was pagan.
Wow.
Right.
Now, I did a lot to go to church. I got baptized Catholic. I did a lot of things. But I distinctly remember coming home that day and telling my mother, I worship Odin now. And my mother's response was, oh, okay. Like, she didn't even...
She probably just was kind of like, oh, that's nice, dear.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, no, she's a physical education major.
Oh, okay.
My mother she had a serious educational background, and her brain was like,
okay.
well, Odin is a different name for God. We're good.
Oh,
but
okay.
even she never said...
She never said no, absolutely not.
Right. So, because I never hit the no, I just...
There was no necessary rebellion there. At least everyone was just like, sure, you could do that.
Sure, why not?
You want to worship Odin? Fair enough. And, so coming up through high school, I was a very violent child because I had sort of violent parents. And when I got out of all of that and got out of college, I wanted to be a better person. Like, this violence is not working for me. So I went through the conscious decision to turn what I'd learned from my parents from being weapons into tools. Mm-hmm. And therefore I tried to be Buddhist. Now, I suck at Buddhism because I'm going to eat meat and I kill flies.
Right, yep.
Fair.
Which I think is enough reasons to not make it as Buddhist. So somehow I got turned into paganism, like into Wicca. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Really.
Yep.
And I blame, you remember the pyramid collection?
Yeah.
I blame the pyramid collection. Because they would send these books with all the witchy stuff in it, and
Gotcha.
like pyramids and
you could like order the
celestial
series.
jewelry. Oh, I bought so much stuff. I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't have a girlfriend. I had nothing, and I was like, something's wrong with me. So a friend of mine and I went to a fortune teller. Mm-hmm. On a whim. We were going to strip clubs, and there was no strip club. Let's step down. Let's go to a strip club. Can't find one. Let's go get a fortune teller. Whatever.
It's a natural order of events.
Right, yeah.
I always tell people, say, we went to a fortune teller because we couldn't go to a strip club. You know, like you do.
Like you do.
Right.
Listen, anytime you're out on a Friday night and you can't find a strip club, there's probably a fortune teller somewhere.
We go in, and she does his reading first, and then she does mine, and before I can sit in the chair, she starts talking about how cursed I am. Ooh. And she's like, this is a generational curse. You're never going to find love. You're never going to be happy. She's like, I didn't even sit down. She didn't turn over a card. Mm-hmm. She just looked at me and said, you are cursed.
You got problems.
Like, it was bad. And then once she did the reading, the curse got worse. Like, it went further back and got worse. And then she said, you got all these curses, but I can lift it for $5,000.
Yeah.
Of course.
Scam.
Right. And I believed, looking at my parents and my life, that the curse thing might be right.
Right.
Like, just because you try to scam me out of $5,000 doesn't mean you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And so, but I didn't have $5,000 to lift it, so I went to a pagan bookstore and decided that I would just read up on paganism, search it on the internet, and figure out how to break a curse.
Right.
There you go.
And in the process of learning enough spell work to try to break this curse, I basically ended up hanging out with pagans and becoming part of the community. And that's how I met my wife. I was at a fundraiser, and that's when I met Celeste. Mm-hmm. Now, what's funny is that story, that whole piece of the curse, I ended up telling for the moth.
I've seen that.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
And so that story, the curse, is with the moth, and that's how I started being a storyteller with them. And now I'm a host with them.
Right.
And they send me everywhere to do these shows, and I'm actually going to London next month
Yeah.
to host their show in London.
So have fun.
Wonderful.
But while I'm doing this, I'm like this weird pagan person, but I don't ever take that off.
Right.
So I don't go to places and take off being pagan.
As like a non-pagan.
Right. Like somehow I'm only pagan in the story, but that's not really who I am. I have 2 wives, so I don't take that off either.
Right.
So my bio says I'm married to the most beautiful women in the world, and everybody wants to
Everyone's
come and
like,
correct my bio.
typo.
Right. As a woman, I'm like, I need you to mind, this is grown folks' business. And I'm usually wearing a pentacle or a star or something. And when I would tell that story, people would come out of the woodwork and they would whisper it, like, blessed be, and run off. Or I was actually in I don't even remember where I was. I did a show and the bartender, the woman, went up to get a drink. She looked me in the eye, went under her shirt, pulled out her pen, put it back in her shirt, and just made me a drink. She never said anything.
Huh.
Wow.
Just like stealth, like your
Pentacle drop, and it was smooth too.
Yeah.
Because
we're the same people,
right?
I wonder.
Drink.
You know, I wonder how many of those kind of people there are in the world. Because when we started this podcast a year ago, we thought, man, we get 100 listeners.
Yeah,
You know,
we didn't think that
and
people would listen.
we didn't think
We
that
also
many people
thought
would
we'd get
listen.
bored about 4 episodes in.
Right.
Well, there's that.
And we're now 31 episodes in and almost 127,000 downloads.
Yeah.
So,
And there's
you know,
a lot of people who listen to us who are new to the path,
Or
or
who are secret.
returning.
right.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
returning,
Yeah.
or and
A lot of them are,
secret.
yeah, a lot of
A
them
lot
are.
of them are.
Yeah.
Well,
They can't share their path.
I am, because your listeners won't know this unless they look me up, I am African American and about 320 pounds. If I tell you I'm pagan, you got some shit to say about it, you probably won't. So I get a chance to do stuff that other people can't do.
Right.
I was in Whitesburg, Kentucky, doing a show at Apple Shop, which is this great radio station, public radio station that this guy started in this town. He tried to make Appalachia hippie
Okay.
instead of letting it go some other ways. And I think we had maybe 50 people in that room, maybe a little bit more. And I stood up there and said, my wife, like I was telling the story, and I said, my wife, and I went on and told the story. And when I got off the stage, it was like 4 gay women who were couples who have been living, I call it Georgia secret. Like, you don't tell anybody you gay. We don't talk about it, but don't nobody have a roommate for 37 years.
Right. It's the 2 ants who live together.
Right.
Right.
And one of the women was crying. And she said, I would have never thought that anyone would get up on that stage and get on any stage in this town and say they were gay. I never thought anybody would just say that out loud. And it's the power of being present.
Mm-hmm.
It's the power of taking your paganism to a bigger stage and not hiding from it.
Right.
And then when people run into pagans, like, oh yeah, that chick that did the moth, she's pagan. She's fine.
Right.
I did a show. That was that show. And the woman I was on the show with, she's a devout Christian. So her whole story was about how Christianity basically saved her life.
Right.
And she was talking about running. She didn't know I was pagan. She talked about this girl who put a curse on her when they were in college. She put something under her bed. She was a witch. Yeah, but she's one of those what I call the loud witches where you just discover paganism. Now you're trying to scare people with it.
Right.
She's one of those. I'm like, that's not a real pagans. You ain't gonna ever know unless they tell you, and nobody's worrying you.
Right.
And when I said to her that I was pagan, she's like, well, I don't know if the Lord let me talk to you. And I said, that's fascinating because you've been talking to me for 3 days. And God usually ain't that slow.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
You'd think if he had a strong opinion about it, he would have made it known by now.
Right, and please don't start scripture conversations with me because I promise you, I got you.
Yeah,
I got you,
yeah.
So don't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've discovered that I think pagans know more about the Bible than most Christians do.
Well, the reason I think that you slide over there is because the Bible isn't saying all the bullshit that people are saying it's saying.
Right.
Like, I can't be a Christian. I still have a faith that sees itself in biblical texts because I get the idea of the fool. I get the idea of the major arcana running through the Christian scriptures. I get that Jesus, if you look at his life and go through all 4 gospels and start laying the cards down, he's doing that fool's journey. 100%. So I get it. You're fine. What I don't like is people not even picking and choosing, but just making stuff up.
Right, yeah.
There are so many things that Christians have just become like reflex responses that aren't biblical at all.
And
like
they don't know that.
God closes a door, but he opens a window.
Right, they think that's in the Bible.
It's not in the Bible.
No, right. And even in paganism, and I said this to my classes, and I always get the blank stare. But it's like, I don't want to bring this up, but you left Christianity for whatever reason, but you get to paganism and act like you don't have to do more work. Like Christianity has only got 1 book, and you only got to read half of that.
Right, yeah.
If that.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you read the Gospels and you read Revelations, you can guess the middle.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
You don't need, you read the first 4 chapters in that last one. You got it.
Right.
That's 90% of the faith.
Yeah.
So paganism, you got to go into anthropology.
You need a library.
Like you need a library, and you really need experts.
Yeah.
Especially if you're doing Reconstruction
Yeah.
paganism, where you decide that you want to do do Egyptian rituals as the Egyptians did it.
And you
Good luck with that one, by the way.
You really do have to become an expert yourself in many ways, especially if you are, a Reconstructionist or you're eclectic solitary. Or you're not working with a coven that has a specific tradition.
Where someone else has done that work and can just pass it down to you.
Exactly. Like, we get a lot of new pagans saying, well, how do you do this and how do you do that?
And my answer is always like, well, here are some research texts for you to start with.
This is where you start. Google is your friend, and here is a list of books. Yes. And here's a list of resources.
I mean, Gwyn's been in this long enough that Google wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
No.
So,
it wasn't when I started either.
Right, yeah.
No.
I mean,
and so you had to go to the library to find stuff.
And pull out books.
Or an AOL chat room.
I did.
That AOL chat room is probably close.
Yeah.
But I tell you something, too. When you do that Google search, skip the first 3,500 entries. Because that stuff is new.
Yeah.
You want to go back to, like, page 6. Go in there. Because I remember the Gardnerian Book of Shadows got uploaded once.
Lady Sheba?
Yeah.
Well, Lady Sheba, but it was an actual other coven had put up their full Book of Shadows.
Yeah.
And my friend was like, somebody's going to figure out how to take this down. And she printed it off. So there was times when I would go and find text, and if I found something that was good or deep or correct, I'd pull it off. I have a handout somewhere in the world regarding invoking and banishing pentagrams and asking, are they evolutionary or creationary? And then in that case, it moves fire. It switches fire from one foot to other. Right, even that, like no one talks about that.
Right,
I used to teach, like, invoking and banishing pentacles. I would talk about that.
Yeah.
Or, and like these, I always love to say kids, but these kids don't know that we get those invoking and banishing pentacles from the OTO. We borrow that from the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. And in the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, you only do earth.
That's
right.
In those corners.
Right.
Yeah, we Paul from Arts and Craft did a whole class on the lesser banishing ritual.
Yes.
Because they have an OTO charter now.
Yes.
And so,
and
he's doing a Thelema
Sunday
School. And so he's doing, I
just kind of love him.
Well, we live 5 miles from them.
Oh, you gotta go.
We're over there all the time.
Oh, yeah. And
they actually do readings there.
Yes, we're there once a week.
So we get to hear a lot of really wonderful,
really interesting conversation.
A lot of good information from Paul. But one of the things that he has said, which I think you're intimating as well, is like people don't know their history of the craft and of paganism. They don't know where these things come from.
How they've borrowed from each other.
Which is absolutely fine, but I'm always concerned about how people don't work out just what I consider to be basic problem solving skills and it's basic critical thinking. In that, Gerald Gardner meets this group, right? They've been secretive this whole time. They're not going to give him everything they got.
Yeah,
right.
Would they?
Right.
I'm going to let you publish these things that aren't harmful to us, that aren't necessarily rooted 100% in our tradition. These are the pieces that have been passed on so long that if you go to any coven around us, they should be what I used to refer to as standard wicked operating procedure, right? So this is stuff that every group probably maybe does. But how do you
at least familiar with.
Familiar with. But how do you fill in the rest of that?
Right.
Like, where do you pull the rest of that from? And the only thing that I could think would feel correct in that is the Golden Dawn.
Right.
So if you're pulling from Gardner's pulling from this ancient, this line, this vein, New Forest, and then pulling from Golden Dawn, then you're pulling from ceremonials.
Right.
Right? So some of the stuff that you're doing is more complicated and was designed to be done in a specific way at a specific time than you're doing it. But even now, if you go to opening writ here or go to a ritual, you got people who don't know how to do invoking and managing pentagrams, pentacles, all the time. Regardless of whether they should be ceremonial or not ceremonial, you don't know they exist and you don't know how to do them.
Right.
And you don't have to do them.
Right.
Fine. But I'm worried that you don't know they exist.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And I've got people who don't know how to ward and shield.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I got
real
people who don't know
common.
how to ground and center.
We did a whole episode on grounding, centering, and shielding because it turned out a whole bunch of people didn't.
Yeah,
know
we're
how
doing
to-
a
they
we're
didn't
doing
know
a
what
whole
the terms
series
even
called
meant.
First Steps.
Yes.
So we
Yes.
cover grounding and shielding and
And so we're
centering.
trying to
and
like go back and uncover like what were the things we had to learn.
Well, and like
we just did shadow work. So I'm really new to all of this.
Okay.
I'm only 18 months really
Yeah.
into paganism.
Fair enough.
After 47 years of Christianity and 2 years of nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm having to learn all of this. Now, I'm part of the ADF.
Okay.
So I'm learning about
ADF
Druidry
stuff.
and ADF stuff and that kind of stuff.
Love them. That's
I
a
do
lot
too.
of education.
Yeah.
I love them because they don't play around.
Yep.
ADF is like, okay, here's the 97,000 things you need to know. Start learning that while we're still discovering things.
Yeah.
So you'll get your new book next week.
Right, yep. But I consider myself not a reconstructionist, but a reclaimer.
Yes.
Because I can't reconstruct what the Druids did. There's not enough material, and what material we have didn't come from them. It came
Yes.
from monks writing
Yes.
about them. So,
Well, we just live in a very different world than our ancestors.
That's
right,
true.
exactly.
So we have to realize that how we worship is going to be different because of
Well,
the
just how we
context
live.
of our world and how we live and where we live.
Yeah.
And we need to also accept that it doesn't have to be special to be right.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to go back, so we're going to do this like the Egyptians. You can't.
Right.
You can't. So, and this is how I learned that. So, I'm a musician by trade, right? So that's my actual degree is in vocal and instrumental music, and I grew up playing violin, singing, and whatnot. And I was going to go into ethnomusicology as my master's, and I just didn't do it. And in ethnomusicology, one of the first things they teach you is you will never hear what Mozart heard
Right.
because you are not at the time. You don't have the gas lamps. You
Right.
don't have the smoke
Even the
from the
instruments are
candles.
different.
But even beyond the instruments, the
atmosphere.
Atmosphere, yeah.
Yeah.
is different.
Yeah.
And that would be enough. The fact that we don't burn tallow candles
Right.
Right.
is enough to change.
Yeah, it changes the chemical
It
composition of
changes
the air.
how you hear the air.
Because
It
that's-
changes
yeah.
what that instrument sounds like. And we are all evolutionarily larger
Yeah.
Yeah.
than people at that time. So like even so the first thing you need to check on a Stradivarius is how small is it.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh, I got a Stradivarius, the first thing you look at is like, it fits you as a modern person. That's not a Stradivarius.
not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a Strat. It's too big.
Yeah.
And just those pieces. So I don't see any reason why that doesn't apply
Right.
to paganism, to worship practices. I think we too don't want to claim our lines, So we got folks who want to drift over into the Celts, but they really come out of the Italians. It's like you could do straight, and I think it works better if you hit your line because these folks know you. You're already going down a group that knows you.
The other day, you led a ritual,
Midnight
in the Garden of Good and Evil.
Yes.
And that included a lot of singing, a lot of music.
Yes.
Now I know why you were so amazing. It's because you are an amazing singer. I was so deeply moved by that entire ritual. Would you explain a little, without obviously,
Giving it away.
demystifying or giving away too much, what that ritual
I'm
was
really
about?
big on demystifying.
Okay, good.
Thank
I
God.
usually
Demystify.
We demystify everything.
because I never do the same thing twice. So
Okay.
I got
Gotcha.
that word. And I would like to start off by saying I proposed a Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil ritual for another event and lost my description. And so whatever that first intonation that didn't happen
At Michigan
for what-
Pagan
at
Fest
Michigan
last year.
Pagan
Yep.
I still don't know what I was trying to do with that one. This one was, just as a sidebar, the OTO used to come in and do Gnostic Mass at Convocation, and I was like, put them at midnight, because I had my Christmas Catholic thing happening.
Right,
So
yeah.
we would do midnight Gnostic Mass.
Gotcha.
And I was like, yeah. And no one had told me that they were back up and running and were going to do it again. So I wanted to do something late at night as well.
Okay.
They just sort of do it like a nighttime
Right.
when everything's really running. So I proposed this idea of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. So double side note, every class and every ritual I do is either going to borrow from a popular book name, but all my classes are music based. So if you look at all my class description, the titles of my classes are always songs. So I did a class yesterday called Maybe I'm Amazed. And it was about love magic, right? So when I did Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, I had this concept that we would go and have dinner with our ancestors. Not just leave food for them, but actually sit down and eat with them. But in the process of doing that, people don't always get the response from family. So to call them and make them more solid in that space, I decided to combine the things that I know, which are magic and storytelling. So my thing was, in this ritual space, I'm still going to break you into small groups and have you tell each other about one of your ancestors. And in that way, create community as a web in the underworld. So your ancestors now know each other, at least in that group. There's this connection that happens because I'm remembered and then I heard about this other person. And so I wanted to start building, like next year, because we always do ritual in the middle world.
Right.
So I wanted to do something in the underworld, and next year when we are supposed to be beating each other up, I'm taking this up into the upper world. I also want to say for the record that ritual didn't exist 100%, so I got in the room. Because it's the kind of thing that runs, you can't do anything with it unless you have to deal with the people who are there. The other part was, I feel that in the African American diaspora, we have a tendency to mourn, to pull mourning from people during funerals.
Right.
So we actually sing mourning songs. We actually want you to cry.
Well, I did.
We want you to really be in that spot of loss.
Right.
But then be able to go on.
Right, yep.
And because of the cultural differences, there's this thing of this sort of stoic, it has been my experience, and people who are not of color, when I've gone to those funerals, there's this sort of stoic, stiff upper lipness,
a reserve
that happens.
Yeah.
But then that mourning process doesn't happen, and it begins to, I feel, it begins to build hungry ghosts. It begins, you never did cry for me. You never but you also never let me go.
Right.
Like that crying and that shedding is a releasing.
Yep.
So during that ritual, it was not my intention to do all that singing. My intention was to bring people in with a call, which is a call that was given to me. To this day, I don't know where it came from. I do it in front of other people in hopes that they'll say, "Oh, I've heard that before," and then tell me what's happening. It was designed when I was walking this circle. Okay, so let me tell you the stupid thing I did. I have all these people in a room. We're going to go into the underworld. Now, if I take people into the underworld who've been into the underworld, it's fine. If you take people in the underworld who haven't been in the underworld, they're like cats. They go running off, they go skittering off until you have to go catch them. I've got 67 people in this room. I do not have the manpower. It's just me and one
to go catch cats.
Ritualists.
Yeah.
Right.
So my genius idea was to actually drop that ballroom into the underworld.
Gotcha.
And so I had a container.
Yep.
But because everybody's talking, they're not engaged in keeping the ballroom in the underworld. So as a ritualist, I'm now keeping us in the underworld.
Right.
But I'm in the underworld so much trying to keep us there that those songs, as I feel people mourning, they come out.
Well, I can tell you as a participant, I sensed obviously the drop as we went under, when we went forward and we eating and feasting with our ancestors. I'm a psychic medium. And so when I went back to her, I mean, I was already crying just from the energy in the room. And as I sat there and I was eating my little cracker or whatever it was I picked up, I could see just a swarm of spirits, a swarm, and they just kept coming, and they were following you, and you know, and so as you were singing and going around the table, and they were following, and it just got bigger and bigger until that entire room was just engulfed in spirit beings, family members. They brought people with them. Like I called.
Dame and I were sitting together the other day, and she said, I did tell everybody just to call an ancestor, not everybody.
That's literally everybody came.
Not whole lines.
People in 17th century garb.
Yes.
Like, I mean, these people were running their lives.
There were children. There were kids. There were adults. I mean, and they were just a huge swarm, and they were just like in this big rhythmic dance going around and around the table. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. I was crying like a fool.
She was still crying when she came back to the room. I was still crying when I came back to the room. And, like, I mean, I called my grandfather, my grandmother, and my uncle. And my uncle passed, probably almost 10 years ago. And I've never sensed his spirit. I've sensed my grandmother. I've never sensed my grandfather. And my father passed a couple of years ago, and he came to me about a year after he passed. He and I were not close in life, but he comes to visit me, you know, about like when we visited each other in real life. We used to talk on the phone and see each other maybe once a year. But he came. And then all of a sudden I realized my great-grandmother, Jenny, from my mother's side of the family had come. And I was like, whoa.
You put up the beacon.
Yeah. But the thing that I did not realize was how much I missed them. And so a lot of those tears was grief that I had never been able to express because my grandparents died when I was a teenager. Uncle died, 10 years ago. I went to his funeral, but I never really could express that grief of losing him.
Yes.
Or even my father.
Yes.
I could not have done this.
Well,
I would have been
lost your shit as soon as Dado showed up.
Right, exactly. Yeah. As soon as my grandfather showed up, it would have been
collapsed.
done.
Yeah.
Well, we went through Heart Center. So going through Heart Center, we had basically come through our heart and put a beam of light right above the altar. We took that globe that those beams created and blew it up and attached it to the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. Then we took that room and put it into the hotel in the underworld,
right?
And just sat on top of that ballroom. And and you could feel the fire next to the altar because that's the world fire at the bottom of the world tree.
Right.
Then all these people started coming. They were coming. They were coming in
before you started.
I was giving directions, and you could feel it.
Yeah.
They were coming, and I was like, "Let me drop the ballroom." And even that's stupid. I mean, I want to tell you right now, it looked great on paper. That was a dumb idea. I'm still in pain and not 100% here because that was just dumb. Don't do that. So we get this thing done, and this one woman had a miscarriage recently. And she's like, I feel better.
Yeah.
And she came to me and she's like, I can't express to you what's going on, what happened, but I'm telling you now, I don't feel that weight. I've had people come to me and say, I didn't even like my mother. She passed a year ago and she's been worrying me, and now I feel like we're good. Because, and I get this from studying with Kende, because ultimately your ancestors gave you a gift that you cannot return.
Right.
They gave you life. They gave you life.
Right.
So they are bigger than you.
Yeah.
But I'm also a fan of giving them back their bullshit. So I'm very good at let's feed them, let's talk to them, let's hand them back their baggage, and then let's go.
Right.
That's 90% of what I'm trying to do in RIT. But it was a lot of people, and it was not, I think, to be a good ritualist, and again, I get this from being Kende, is not planning something to the nth degree, but 100% being capable of getting everybody home.
Yeah.
Right.
And you did.
Right. I had a couple stragglers.
Did you know, we had in my group, we actually had enough time to go around our group several times and tell several stories, which was really nice. But we had one young lady who was pregnant and probably not less than a month away from delivery. And she was explaining to us what she was experiencing as we dropped the room and as we were in the underground with all these spirits around. The baby started moving and kicking and had up until that time been really, really quiet. And she started experiencing like labor pains. She felt like almost, I was like, oh honey, please. Not
here, not now.
And long as we were in the underground, as long as we were surrounded by all these ancestors, and I could just sense like great grandmas coming up to her and blessing the baby and things like that, and the baby was responding and kicking. And then as soon as you brought us up, as soon as we came up, that baby settled. I mean, it was cool. I got to hear the stories of the people I was with, of their ancestors, and it was really, really, it was a blessing to me to be able to share that with them.
Yes, it's what we used to do. And that piece of storytelling and being around the fire is what we used to do. And it's not the same technique, but when I go on the road to host storytelling shows, I actually go a little bit into shamanic body, and I will tap the ancestor soul and then hit the ancestor souls of the people in the room. Because this is what we used to do. That's why this feels familiar. And then my biggest thing is that we're family.
Yeah.
And that's been my biggest fight for the longest time. It's like, I don't care what happens, we're in this thing together.
Right.
We're all we got.
Yeah.
So we have to perpetually remind ourselves we're family. You don't have to get along. You don't have to like each other. This is it.
Right.
There's no planet X we're going to go to. This is it. You are going to live, you're going to be born, live, and die amongst these people.
Right.
So do you have enough time to really engage in this foolishness.
Yeah.
That's right.
And any ritual I do is going to, at some point, try to address that. Like, do you have enough time for this foppery?
Right.
That's
So I'm
right.
glad you enjoyed it. I've gotten a lot of feedback about that ritual, and a lot of those techniques about getting people into the underworld and working the tree I got from taking post-tribal shamanism classes
From Ken Day.
Day.
Yeah, we
He
interviewed
does that.
Ken a couple of days ago.
Couple of
Yeah.
days ago.
Yeah, he's got a 9-part series, and it really is giving you the tools to do that work. And he's been my mentor 10 years,
Okay.
maybe longer than that. I don't like to claim him because he's such a pain in the behind. I know we already said goodbye, I'm going to throw that out there. That's my other thing about the feasting.
Mm-hmm.
We have stopped feeding people.
Right.
Yeah.
Spiritually, emotionally, physically, we've stopped. And when I came through, the biggest part of Red was the meal.
That's right.
It was that red meal in the middle of the ritual, and it was the blessing, the prosperity blessing of may you never hunger and may you never thirst.
Yeah.
And it was not just to say the words, but to say, I'm taking on the responsibility of seeing that you never hunger and you never thirst.
Right.
Right.
And we
May
still
you never
do that
hunger.
more.
Here's some bread. May you never
Right.
thirst. Here's
I
some
mean, that's what it
water.
is,
Right,
right
yeah.
there. May you never
Yep.
hunger. Food. May you never thirst. Beverage, you know.
Yeah.
And we just kind of have stopped doing those things, and people act like it costs. I mean, I had bread and cranberry juice for 67 people. I think I spent $5. Like, it can be done.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do 67 people for $5. It's not going to cost you that much, and we need to start doing that again. So
I agree.
that's
Yep.
why I do the breakfast. It's may you never hunger,
Yeah.
may you never thirst. How you pulling it off? I'm actually going to make you breakfast.
Yep.
That's right.
So,
And that's why we've had Bill L on and Pin and that whole thing. And
Yeah.
we're actually helping him start a pin down where we live. Actually, at Arts and Craft.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's going to live in their
Nice.
building.
Donating
So,
some of their space.
yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
To a pantry.
So by
We've-
April, that
we've
should be
been
open.
food pantry people
Yeah.
Oh,
needing
yeah.
to go to the pantry and
Yep.
get the food.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And at that time, you know, having to listen to
A sermon.
Christian prayer or a
Right.
sermon before they'll
Oh,
let you
God.
fill out the paperwork, before they'll let you in. I'm like,
Oh yeah, totally.
Oh, no,
Just-
I know.
Yeah.
you know,
I 100% know. I worked for a food bank
Yeah.
for a long time, and they actually shifted to a grocery store model
Oh, okay.
in some of the locations. So you just come in, take stuff off the shelves.
Right.
They weigh it, and hopefully you get a chance to go. But yeah, when you got to go to those churches,
Yeah.
it's like, oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much, but can I just get my cheese?
right, exactly.
I appreciate you and your God, but can I get my...
Yeah, I just want my government
My
cheese.
corn.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for spending time with us. It's wonderful to see you, to talk to you. I just hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. It was wonderful being here.
You've been listening to Three Pagans and a Cat. Find out more information at www.threepagansandacat.com.